Hello, this is my survey of exceptionalities for 2025 final project. I had a really pretty transformative time in this class, um, and here's just a few parts of what I learned. So I learned to define inclusion by like acknowledging everyone's right to be a full member of society, because we are aiming to fix kind of sort of fix society's inequalities in the face of historical prejudice. Inclusion also means fighting for broader access so that no one is left out of the discussion about, and by discussion I really mean like um, discussion of how to build accessible buildings, how to get more disabled or disabled perspective or um, differently abled perspective in architecture firms, for example, about like, oh, let's actually like build, universally designed buildings, for example. That's what I mean about like fighting for those things in terms of inclusion. Yeah, I've just started to see it everywhere. I very much noticed the the curb cuts and uh, the yellow rumple strips to know when you're on the other side of the road. Um, and I've started to really notice the places that don't have those, right? Like the music building on University of Arkansas campus is pretty terrible for access. And I've just kind of started picking that vibe up from a lot of different buildings. Like, okay, yeah, you could not move around this building if you. So I've really started to see it everywhere. Um, what have I learned about the history of disability and disability rights? Um, really, institutionalization and exclusion comes from a lack of understanding and a self-justification on behalf of the able. When I heard those when we had to do those first history assignments, it just seemed like the answer used to be, oh, put them somewhere else because they need more help than us, you know. Um, and what that's what I mean by self-justification on behalf of the able, like that it's the able-bodied people that have always tried to remove the disabled people from the environment. Um, and they justify it by saying, oh, they just need more help. Um, So that legacy still kind of goes on today in some small, in some more hidden ways. So there is still um, work to do, as you can imagine. What I've learned about ableism and the barriers that disabled people face is that prioritizing able bodies can be the default if other types of bodies are not included from the start. Many places in everyday life become difficult or inaccessible if every aspect is based on assumptions of average height, mobility, and abilities in a broader sense. Um, it has to be conscious. The inclusion from the start has to be conscious. That's what I've learned about UDL is like, oh, you build it. You build it with the perspective. You don't just like do what comes naturally, because what does come naturally is um, internal biases. Common characteristics of inclusive spaces, like I said, open design, both in physical spaces and in communicating information. Um, just as if just as you'd want to have easy to access walkways, you also need classroom content and instructions easy to access by not locking them away in a dusty email box or in a wall of text. Um, really kind of took the discussion more towards like an inclusive classroom in terms of processing information, where just as you'd want open design in, you know, a library, or you'd want open design in a restaurant, or you'd want, these public spaces. Um, it's important to realize that the inclusive classroom, I think, also needs to have that sense of open design with easy to understand instructions, maybe posted on the wall, maybe right at the top of the blackboard, or um, and making sure that students feel like they can navigate your class, even if it's in person, if they can do that easily, um, that makes it more accessible, and it's not just locked away in a syllabus that you sent out at the beginning of the year, and it was a block and wall of text, and in there you had to find the little thing. Like, that is not open design. What changes can I implement in my professional practice? Openly, publicly, and regularly talking about what are the expectations, and allowing students the space to disagree with those expectations. Um, I got to tour a Montessori school a few weeks ago, or about a month ago, and it's really kind of taken my thought to a whole new level about like, oh, like students need to have autonomy. Like, they need to learn to um be like independent in themselves, and not just be listening to not just doing what they're told. And so if they have the space to disagree with the expectations of the class, then it'll be much more suited to what they need. Um, what strategies will I use in my future? This type of expansive thinking benefits everyone, and we must invite and enable everyone to think expansively. What would happen if we allowed students to be involved in critiquing the curriculum and molding it in real time? How can we get someone to speak up in class when the learning doesn't include them? What was my most profound experience? I'll explain these points further, but realizing that I've needed accommodations this whole time, and with that, a realization that um, if I've needed accommodations, who else is like silently struggling? Um, so yeah, I've never sought out accommodations, just because I never really qualified enough for them. But this class made me reevaluate my own history of being in school, and point out the moments where I needed extra help that I didn't get. And I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't know how to ask for help. And if that's my story, I wonder how many people's story um, also share in that story. Thank you.